Okay. I think we good, man. I think we good. It's a little chilly in here. I ain't gonna lie. What's good, Kick Squad? It's your boy Mo back again with another video. Tonight's live, man. I'm excited about not only, well, I'm gonna say not only, we have finally reached 1,000 subscribers, y'all. And I don't have the clapping, or I don't got all the sound effects set up yet. I apologize, but that is major for me, man. That is amazing. So much love, so much support, man. An outpouring of just love, and it's amazing. So I want to thank everybody for joining this family, rocking with me through my inconsistent days. And stuff came up, and medical issues, trying to manage work or whatever, life was happening. But we're here nonetheless. Next, we got to get that. We need like 800 more watch hours. I think we're at like 2,200 watch hours, which is another crazy feat that I never really expected to reach. But man, we're that close to getting monetized, getting our watch hours, over 1,000 subscribers. Next step, 5K. I'm not going 2,000, 3. Now we're looking ahead. We're going to 5K next. So I want to thank everybody for all the love and support. Again, make sure you hit them like buttons, man. Subscribe if you're not already. Share these videos, these lives, anything you enjoy. Comment, all of that helps. Tonight's videos, we're only going to do two. They're a little on the longer side. The first one we're going to do, as you can see, we got a Mr. Ballin video. We've never done a Mr. Ballin video. I've actually never listened to one of his stories before, but I know he's top notch and everybody loves him. So after we do Mr. Ballin's video, we're going to switch over to my guy Dougie, another story from him. He doesn't disappoint. I don't expect Mr. Ballin to disappoint either. I'm not going to lie to you. But yeah, man, that's all we got for tonight. Again, I don't want to keep saying the same stuff like a broken record, but thank you all for all the support, and let's continue to make this family grow, make this family jump. Oh, and all the comments on not the last live, the one before that. I want to thank everybody for all the comments. The constructive criticism. That's how I get better as a content creator. That's how these lives get better. That's how the views keep coming in. So I want to thank you all for letting me know what you wanted me to do in these videos, and how I'm supposed to make them better, because I definitely take notes of all of that. And I was testing some things out. That's why the layout was the way it was, and apparently it didn't work. But thank you, because that's what I needed you to tell me. I need you to let me know you prefer it this way rather than the other. But yeah, man, I rambled way too long. I'm ready to get into this, man. So again, if you haven't already, please drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, get your popcorn, kick your feet up, and let's get ready. Mr. Ballin, this is the scariest basement story you will ever hear.
Okay, we just wrapped up the 15 city live tour. Like literally, this is my first day back in the studio. The tour was amazing, really. It was awesome. It was so good to meet the fans of The Strange, Dark, and Mysterious in person. That was really cool. But I knew there was one story I had to tell first off once I got back in the studio, and it's the one I'm doing right now. It is the final story from the set list from the tour. So if you didn't see the tour, well, you're in luck. You're seeing the best.
I find it amazing guys like him go on tour. Like, is it just like, how do you do a tour for this? And I'm wondering where he went, because if he was anywhere near Pittsburgh, I would have loved to have checked him out. I'm very curious now. I want to see what kind of tours, or how does a tour for a storyteller as such goes.
Story of the tour. Now, technically, we briefly covered this story like 4.5 years ago. However, It was terrible. I went back and looked at this video, and it was just poorly put together. It's like really short, and so many of the key parts of the story were just omitted because I didn't know what I was doing. But now I sort of do, and this story was completely broken down, restructured, rewritten, and the end result is this totally horrifying, like, encore story from the live tour that I really think, even if you've heard the OG before, you're gonna love this one. This one, by far, got the biggest reaction from the thousands and thousands of people that watched this live. Okay, so this is called What's in the Basement, and it's really good. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, please tell the like button you're going to gift them tickets to my first ever live storytelling tour, but don't tell them you got them tickets that are mid-row floor seats to the Indianapolis show. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story.
All right.
In the fall of 1986, Frank Bowen, along with his two daughters, Tina, who was 15, and Karen, who was 9, they experienced just a terrible loss. So Frank's wife and the girl's mother suddenly passed away from cancer. And so that in and of itself was obviously tragic and terrible, but what made it even worse is that, she had been a working mom, and her income was a vital part of just making ends meet in the Bowen household. And so as soon as she passed away, as much as Frank just wanted to be there for his girls to help them grieve the loss of their mother, he really couldn't. He started immediately having to pick up all these late night shifts at his job, again, just to make sure financially the family was whole. And so it's like within days of the mother passing away, Frank is out late at work, and these two poor girls are just stuck at home by themselves, just totally grief-stricken and alone. And so in October of that year, on one of those nights where Tina and Karen were home alone and their dad was out working late, these girls, you gotta remember, they desperately miss their mother. All they want is to just have one more interaction with her. They can't believe that she's gone. They were so close with her. It's like their whole lives have been turned upside down. And so on this night that they're home alone, putting themselves to bed, they start talking about how, man, I just wish there was just a way to communicate with mom. And at some point, one of the girls says, wait a minute, maybe there is a way to do that. So the girls owned a Ouija board and a Ouija.
Knew this was coming. I feel like this is gonna be an intense story. Man, I don't know what it is. I just got that feeling, man.
Ouija board is basically a way people believe they can speak to the dead. It looks sort of like a game board. It's got letters and numbers on it, and it's got a yes and a no on there. And there's this thing called a planchette, which is basically like this little free-floating dial, almost like a pointer, that you can place on the board. And people that use the Ouija board will place their fingertips right on the edge of the planchette. And they will literally just say things like, if there are spirits in the room with me right now, give me a sign. And in theory, if there are, the spirits will move the planchette around so that people have their fingertips on it, but they're not controlling it, and it will move around the board and land on yes or no, or spell things out, or give numbers. It's just a way people believe they can speak to the dead. And so Karen and Tina are like, why don't we get our Ouija board out and have a seance? Let's try to communicate with mom and see if she manipulates the board and gives us a sign that she's here with us. And so, Tina and Karen, they get their Ouija board, they go down into the basement of their house, they lay it out, and they put their fingers on the planchette, and after a minute, one of the girls is like, hey mom, are you here with us right now? And they have their fingers on the planchette, but nothing happens. So again, the girls kind
of... I don't like how it was playing that real dramatic music in the background, and then it just shut off real suddenly. Now I'm losing my mind. I'm getting paranoid because I feel like I hear everything else that music's not there to distract me. Now I'm confused and nervous. I'm not I'm not liking the thoughts that are running through my head because he decided it was a good idea to 86 that music and make this story even crazier. I told you I'm sensitive. I'm soft. I'm sorry.
And wait a minute, and they try again. Mom, if you're here with us right now, please, anything, just move it even a little bit. Show us you're here with us right now. Nothing happens. And so over and over and over again for over an hour, the girls just sit there asking every combination of question they can possibly think of to try to elicit a response from their mother, who they so want to believe is like with them right now, sort of looking out for them. But no matter how earnestly and passionately they asked these questions, the planchette never moved. So the seance didn't work. And so the girls, it's not clear if they literally believed they were actually going to get a reaction from their mom. But, this was pretty disappointing. It was like another reminder that, mom really is gone. And so they packed up their Ouija board, very frustrated, and they went upstairs to their respective bedrooms on the second floor of the house. They climb into bed and they try to go to sleep. So their father is still out at work. He won't be home for some time. And the girls know this. They know that they are home alone until they fall asleep. And so they're laying in their bedrooms. It's totally dark. It's quiet. And as they're laying there, the girls begin to hear a tapping sound coming from somewhere in their house. Now, it was clear to them that the tapping was not coming from the floor of the house they were on. It was coming from somewhere either on the first floor or maybe down in the basement. But, at first, the tapping sounds didn't really alarm them at all. It just sort of sounded like, house sounds at night. The sound of machines whirring or clicking, or maybe branches outside striking the side of the house, or who knows what. But they seemed sort of like harmless sounds that you would expect at night. However, as the tapping sort of persisted, it wasn't really consistent tapping sound. It was more sporadic, but it was consistently sporadic. Like it was obvious whatever this was, it wasn't stopping. As that continued, the girls began to tune in more and more to it and started wondering, like, what is this? And at some point, the younger of the two girls, Karen, the 9-year-old, she started to get spooked. The sound was kind of freaking her out. And so she got out of her bed and she left her room. She goes down the hallway. She comes into Tina's bedroom and she goes up to her big sister and she's like, "Do you hear that tapping sound?" And Tina's like, "Yeah, what is that?" And so the two girls, they leave Tina's bedroom together. They go out into the hallway. They can still hear the tapping. It's kind of coming from downstairs somewhere. And the girls, they walk to the top of the stairs, basically looking down the stairwell that wraps down to the first floor. They can't see the first floor. They can only see, the halfway point, the landing. And they're hearing the tapping sound coming from somewhere down there. And the girls are just kind of listening, not really reacting. And at some point, one of the girls says, "Wait a minute. What if this tapping sound is Mom? What if the seance we did worked? What if she is here and now she's giving us a sign that she's with us right now? What if it's her?" And so feeling sort of excited all of a sudden, one of the girls just says, "Mom, is that you down there?" And immediately there's a response. Tap, tap, tap. Something from downstairs is reacting to their question. And the girls are psyched. This is what they wanted when they did their seance. All they wanted was some interaction with their mother, and they think right now they're getting it. They're talking to their mom.
No, you're not.
And so after getting that tap, tap, tap response, one of the girls asks another question. "Mom, if it's really you, give us another sign. Really show it's you." Tap, tap, tap. Something for sure is interacting with them downstairs. And the girls 100% believe it's their mother, and again, they are thrilled. And so the girls, they start walking down the stairs, firing off more questions to their mom. And even though some of their questions weren't really yes or no questions, they would always get that sort of tap, tap, tap response. Like, again, something is interacting with them. And as they made their way down to the first floor and they're hearing this tapping and they're sort of following it around, it eventually brings them to the head of the stairs that leads down into the basement. And they open up the basement door and they're asking more questions. They're getting those tap responses and it's clearly coming from downstairs. And even though the girls are really excited, it's gotta be Mom, they weren't so confident that they were prepared to go down into the basement to follow after this tapping sound. So they sort of stopped at the top of the stairs, looking down into the basement. It's gotta be Mom, but it's still a little bit frightening to go down there. And so they stayed there right above the stairs, looking into the basement, just constantly asking questions and getting responses from down in the basement from Mom. It was great. And eventually, after, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever it was, the tapping just stopped. The girls continued asking questions, but there was no longer any reaction from the basement. And so at that point, the girls, they're so excited. They really feel like they've been talking to their mom, and they're so jazzed up from this experience that they're like, we're not going to be able to sleep. And so the girls just stay awake in the kitchen until Frank comes home from work. And when Frank comes inside and he sees his girls are awake, it's like midnight or whatever it is, he's sort of surprised. But the girls rush up to him and they're like, Dad, you wouldn't believe it. We had this seance and we heard this tapping sound and we know it was Mom. Mom is with us right now. We were talking to her. Now, Frank, he's totally caught off guard by what they're saying, but he also knows his girls, they're going through this horrible time in their lives. I mean, they've just lost their mother. He can't even imagine their level of grief. I mean, he's obviously grief-stricken, but this is their mom. And so he's seeing his girls for the first time in what feels like a long time, looking really happy and excited, and they're telling him that tapping sounds in the house are their mother. And so Frank, he's not going to pick holes in what they're doing. He's not going to question, what's actually happening in the house. Instead, as soon as they tell him all this stuff, he just goes, you know what, girls? Of course your mom is here. Your mom will always be here. She will always be looking out for you. Your mom is with you right now in the house. I'm sure of it.
Frank a better parent than me. Now, I'm in my head, if I were Frank, I'm just coming home from work and I'm bombarded as soon as I walk into the door with this story. I need to understand, first of all, where the hell does Ouija board come from? Why do we think this was a good idea? Oh, y'all want to invite random spirits in my basement? We got problems now. This spirit got to go, and y'all might have to go with it because hell no, I'm not that dude. I'm sorry. Maybe your grandmama, she could handle it, but I'm not made for that. Now, all love to my kids, but I don't want their stupidity or the possibility of them being stupid to bring these negative entities into my home. And we don't know if it's negative yet or not, but I'm just going to assume it is. But that's just me. I apologize.
And so the girls, they're so happy. Again, this was such an amazing experience. Their dad, he also agreed this is so good. And so the girls, they happily go upstairs to their bedrooms and they go to sleep. And Frank, truthfully, after having this exchange with his daughters, didn't really think much of it. Again, he's sort of thinking that, there wasn't really tapping sounds coming from his deceased wife. This is just some coping mechanism that the girls are using to deal with this tragedy. And he thinks, you know what? It's healthy enough. It's making them happy. What's the big deal? And so Frank, he goes to bed. Over the next few days, the tapping sounds in the house would continue. And they were no longer just coming from the basement. They were also coming from the kitchen. They were coming sometimes from the second floor. They were sort of coming from all over the house. But the girls were the only ones who could hear the sounds. Like every time they'd hear the tapping, if their dad was home, they'd call him over, but Frank wouldn't hear anything. Now again, Frank doesn't really believe that there's actually tapping happening. He doesn't think this is actually real at all, but he's playing along with it because, his girls are happy, clearly this is their coping mechanism. And so again, Frank's not thinking much of it. It's harmless. The girls are frustrated that he can't hear it, but again, it's overall still a very good thing. It's Mom. Mom is trying to communicate with them. However, after a few days, post-seance, as the tapping continued, the girls began to change their attitude about the tapping sounds. The first day and over those first few days, it really did feel like a good thing. This is Mom. This is positive. This was definitely a good thing. But after about 72 hours, post-seance, the girls began to sort of feel frightened by the tapping because the tapping no longer was really just coming mostly from the basement. It now started coming almost exclusively from their bedrooms at night. So they'd be laying in bed and they'd hear, tapping underneath their beds. They'd hear tapping in their closets. And it was frightening. And they would call their dad in and he'd come into their bedrooms and he wouldn't find anything. But now, Frank, who previously had just sort of let this continue, this is his girl's coping mechanism for this terrible loss. Now he's seeing that his girls, they don't really think it's mom anymore. They don't know what this is. And it's also disrupting their sleep. And so now it's not a healthy thing anymore. This is a problem. Like, it's disrupting his girls' lives. And so Frank begins at this point, 3 days post-seance now, he begins telling his girls, like, hey, come on, guys, there's nothing to be scared of here. These tapping sounds are just normal house sounds. You're overthinking it. Like, there's nothing that's going to harm you in the house. Mom is definitely here looking out for you, but she's not making those tapping sounds. You got to let this stuff go and just forget about this stuff. But the girls, they're like, Dad, we're not making the tapping sounds up. Just because you don't hear them does not mean they're not real. And they began to tell their dad, like, we think the seance worked, but we actually no longer think it's mom that's sort of come out of the seance. We think we unlocked a different spirit, an evil spirit. And now that evil spirit is haunting our house. And so Frank, at this point, he's like, guys, that's not what's going on here. You really need to stop. Like, these tapping sounds are not real. They're in your head or they're normal. And so Frank and his daughters really began to fight over this because the girls, they know they're hearing sounds, and Frank's like, I'm not. And so they're really starting to fight over it. The girls, they're getting more and more frightened just being in their house, in particular at night when these sounds would typically start. And so fast forward about a week after the seance, and now the girls really are so scared to be in their house because of this tapping, which they believe is now this evil spirit in their house. They're finding all sorts of excuses to just stay out of their house. Like, when dad's at work late, they're trying to stay at their friend's house and not be home because it was too frightening. And Frank, he's sort of at his wit's end with what to do with his girls, because now this thing that's going on in the house, this delusion, as he believed it was, that his girls were suffering from, it was really disruptive and unhealthy. And he began telling his girls, like, if you can't stop with this whole tapping delusion, you're going to have to go to grief counseling. Like, this is too much. And so, again, fast forward about a week here, and that's what's going on in the Bowen household. And on this particular day, the girls, Tina and Karen, they didn't have a place to go that night. They didn't have a friend who was available. And so they're home at their house alone. Frank's out for the night doing a late night shift. And the girls, they're in their kitchen just kind of hanging out. They're pretty anxious here. And they start to hear tapping sounds coming from the basement. Now, by this point, the tapping sounds were so common that just hearing the tapping sounds was not like this horribly frightening thing. It was just sort of this very unsettling thing where nobody knew what they were. And again, the girls think it's something evil. But on this night that the girls are alone, dad's gone, Tina, the older of the two, she says to Karen, like, Dad doesn't believe us. He does not believe that there's tapping sounds in the house. And so we, right now, need to go down in the basement and investigate, because if we don't, no one's ever going to look into this. Like, nobody believes us. And Karen is horrified at the idea, Karen's the 9-year-old, of going down into the basement, to go see what this tapping is, but she doesn't want to be away from her sister, and so she's like, okay. And so Tina gets a knife from the kitchen, she goes to the door to the basement, Karen follows right behind her, and Tina, she opens up the door, and the two girls begin going down the steps. And once they get to the bottom of the steps and they're in the basement, it's just this kind of blank slate down there. There's a washing machine and a dryer, there's some boxes, but it's just sort of a dank, sort of open, nothing cellar down there. And the girls, when they got down there, they're looking for the origin of this tapping sound. And on some level, they expected to find something that was making these sounds because they've been hearing these sounds. For them, it's not a delusion. Like, every time they hear these sounds, they are real to them. Just because their dad doesn't hear it does not mean it's not real to them. And if you look at the beginning, when they first started hearing the sounds, they thought it was their mom. And they never really fully investigated. They maybe didn't want to find out that, perhaps the tapping sound was, a washing machine or something, because that would destroy the illusion that it was their mom. So they never fully investigated then. And then the next few days after that, when it sort of transitioned and became a scary thing, the girls also never really investigated because it was scary now. They didn't want to know what was making this tapping sound. And so now here we are a week into this, and they've gone down into the basement where they've heard the tapping sounds, and they're like prepared to see something that is making this sound because it's real for them. Like, maybe it's a raccoon or some animal that's gotten into their house, but there has to be something because they hear these sounds. But now they're looking around this basement and there's nothing. There's nothing that could possibly be making this sound, and the girls are horrified. And so after being down there only for a couple of minutes, Tina, who's got the kitchen knife, she's like, Karen, let's get out of here. Like, this isn't right. Let's get out of here.
Not
and
a
so the
real
girls
photo
turn
of
around
Tina.
and they begin going back up the steps. And as they do, they notice something on the stairway wall that they didn't see on the way down. Written in red on the wall are the words, "I'm in your closet. Come find me." And when the girls see that, they are horrified. And they sprint up the stairs, they bolt out of their house, they go to their neighbor's house, start banging on the neighbor's door. The neighbor comes to the door and he's like, "What's going on?" And the girls are like, "Oh my God, we had this seance, we've been hearing tapping in the walls, and now somebody's written on the walls, we don't know what's going on." And the neighbor is so confused, really doesn't understand what's happening. And he's like, "Look, girls, just come into my house, you're safe here, we'll wait for your dad to come home, he'll know what to do." And so the girls, they're hysterical. They go into the neighbor's house, they shut the door, and they wait. And then a little bit later, Frank Bowen, their dad, he comes home. The neighbor immediately flags him down and calls him over. And he's like, "Look, here's what happened. Your girls came over. They said, something about writing on the walls. I don't know." And Frank's like, "Okay, all right." And he tells his girls, like, "Look, stay here. You're safe here. I'll go check the house and make sure nobody's in there." Frank at this point in no way suspects that there's anything, evil or bad in his house. He thinks this is just a continuation of this delusion the girls are sort of acting out. And so Frank, alone, goes back to his house. He opens up the door, he goes inside, he searches the house, and he looks everywhere, but there's nobody in the house. He does find the writing in the stairwell going down to the basement. It does say, "I'm in your closet, come find me," but it's written in ketchup. And so after, again, searching the whole house and finding nothing other than this writing, Frank goes back over to the neighbor's house and he talks to his girls, and he's not mad at them. In some ways, he feels like all of this is basically his fault. Like, he should have handled this more aggressively at the beginning, and he let it get to this point. And so he tells his girls, like, "Look, I know that you wrote those words on the wall. I know that all of this is sort of a delusion that's playing out that started with, something good. You thought it was mom, but now it's become something that isn't good. It's disruptive. You've convinced yourself the house is haunted. And I'm very worried that this is a product of grief. Like, grief is leading you to do these things, and it needs to stop. And so starting tomorrow, you're going to go into grief counseling. We need professional help here to make sure you girls are taken care of. I should have done this from the beginning, so we're going to make that happen right now." Now, the girls knew they didn't write that on the wall. They're not making the tapping sounds, but they also knew their dad 100% didn't believe them, like zero, and it was not going to change. And on some level, like, they think maybe there's truth to what he's saying. Maybe they are so grief-stricken that they've convinced themselves of things that are not real. And so in this sort of vulnerable moment where the girls are totally upset about what they've seen and what they've heard, they just tell their dad, like, "Fine, like, whatever, we'll go to grief counseling." And so sure enough, the next day, the girls would start grief counseling, and right away, all the tapping in the house, all the writing on the walls, all that stuff stopped. Like, peace returned to the Bowen household, at least at first.
Yeah, at least at first.
As you may already know, I recently was on tour. Me and my team spent 4 weeks traveling in a bus around the country, telling stories live to thousands of people. It was totally incredible and surreal. But I've got to say, the best part of the whole experience was just getting to interact with you all in person, fans of the strange, dark, and mysterious. And also, pretty much everybody turned out in flannel. It was like a sea of thousands of people rocking the flannel. Because basically at this point, the official uniform of the strange, dark, and mysterious is the flannel. And guess what? I have a surprise for you that has to do with flannel just in time for the holidays. I am so excited to share that our brand new official Mr. Ballin flannel is now for sale on shopmrballin.com. But hurry, because quantity is limited. This is a first come, first served situation. But it's not just a flannel. We actually have a whole new collection for the holiday season. And they include things like the Mr. Ballin Christmas sweater. We also have a hat, we have a hoodie, there's a blanket, like a flannel blanket. There's ornaments, there's stickers, there's pins, and much more. But don't wait too long to buy this stuff, because this is a holiday drop, which means if you want it in time for the holidays, you gotta order now. So again, head on over to shopmrballin.com to pick up your official Mr. Ballin flannel, along with all the other great stuff we're dropping for the holiday season. I can't wait to see some of you guys rocking the flannel the next time I go on tour.
I need that.
Happy
I need
holidays,
that.
everybody. Okay, back to the story.
Since we have that little interlude, I apologize. I love like him, Dougie. I wonder how many other um storytellers there are. Like this is how they do their content. I love like they both tell stories completely different. Dougie uses a lot of inflection in his voice. He does a lot of the animated photos and stills in his videos to like give the story, or maybe he doesn't. Now, at this point, I can't tell if it's just my imagination or if Dougie's showing these images for me to. I don't know. I don't know. But Mr. Ballin, he doesn't really use anything like that. Like, yeah, he has stuff playing in the background and popping up here and there, but what's really drawing me to his story is him. Like stand alone, his voice is pretty even the whole time. It's just like the way he tells his story is it's crazy. I don't know, it's so good. But I wonder how many other storytellers are out there like this that do this kind of narration. I'm very curious to check them out now.
Fast forward 3 weeks to December 8th, 1986. So this is 3 weeks after the girls began their therapy, and in those 3 weeks, the Bowen household is totally calm. There's no more tapping, nothing, everything is fine. But on December 8th, Frank, along with his 2 girls, Tina and Karen, and their friend, Kathleen, they had been out for the evening, maybe getting ice cream or going out to eat or whatever, and they come back to the Bowen household. And when they do, it's nighttime, so it's dark outside, and Frank, he goes up to the porch, he goes to the front door, and as he's about to open up the door, he looks through one of the windows of his house, and he sees there are several lights on in the house that he didn't remember leaving on before they left.
What just happened? No, no, it crashed. That's a sign, y'all. That is a sign. Hold up, hold up. I apologize for that. I don't know what the hell just happened. But okay. We should be good now. We're good now. Continue, Mr. Ballin.
That he didn't remember leaving on before they left. And so he just thinks like, that's weird. Like I could have sworn I turned those lights off. He's kind of looking back at the girls right behind him, sort of wondering if maybe they left the lights on, but he's like, oh, that's weird.
What the hell? And my hands were down here. I didn't touch
So
nothing.
he unlocks the front door, he swings the door open, and immediately he sees this scene inside of his house that makes no sense. The TV is on, a radio is on, and furniture in the first floor of the house where he's looking has clearly been moved. Not dramatically, but things have been moved around on the first floor. Like if you live somewhere, you know where things go. Things are off. And Frank, like he's seeing this, and he sort of looks.
Why? Why does it keep doing this? Make that make sense, y'all. I don't know what's going on. I'm about to lose my mind.
And their friend, Kathleen, they had been out for the evening, maybe getting ice cream or going out to eat or whatever, and they come back to the Bowen household. And when they do, it's nighttime, so it's dark outside, and Frank, he goes up to the porch, he goes to the front door, and as he's about to open up the door, he looks through one of the windows of his house, and he sees there are several lights on in the house that he didn't remember leaving on before they left. And so he just thinks like, that's weird. Like I could have sworn I turned those lights off. He's kind of looking back at the girls right behind him, sort of wondering if maybe they left the lights on, but he's like, oh, that's weird. So he unlocks the front door, he swings the door open, And immediately he sees this scene inside of his house that makes no sense. The TV is on, a radio is on, and furniture in the first floor of the house where he's looking has clearly been moved. Not dramatically, but things have been moved around on the first floor. Like if you live somewhere, you know where things go. Things are off. And Frank, like he's seeing this, and he's sort of looking back at Tina and Karen, and he's like, did they do this? Are we back to this whole delusion? You gotta remember that even though it's been 3 weeks now of peace in the Bowen household, Frank is all too aware of how insane it was right before then. With the girls, writing on the wall, at least according to him, and thinking there was an evil spirit in their house. And, he's thinking, is this them? Like, somehow did they do this? This feels sort of like a continuation of that. He's looking at the girls, but he's thinking to himself, like, they've been with me. We've been out of the house. How could they do this?
Right.
But again, Frank is sort of caught. On the one hand, he knows this could be his girls, but he's also thinking that's not possible. And so in that mind state of sort of being caught between these two opposing ideas, Frank, instead of backing out of the house and calling the police like anybody else would do, he instead just begins like walking into the house, sort of nonchalant, like not really sure how to react. And he begins this sort of half-cocked search through the house. And the whole time, Tina, Karen, and Kathleen, they see what's going on, and the two daughters, they're terrified. I mean, they're all too aware of all the tapping and the writing on the walls. They're thinking, this is real, it's happening again. And so they're tucked up right behind Frank, who again, Frank is like in shock. He's just like wandering through the house like, what's going on here? Turns the TV off, he's walking around, turns the radio off, he's moving furniture back around, and he can't believe it. And so he does this weird, like again, half-invested search through the first floor. He doesn't find anybody there. He goes to the second floor, does the same search. Again, all three girls, the two daughters and the friend, they're right behind Frank because they're so scared. They do the search of the second floor, nobody there. They search the attic, nobody there either. They go down to the basement, nobody in the basement, like there's nobody in the house. And so Frank is like, what is going on here? And then he remembers there's actually a room on the first floor of the house that he forgot to search. It was just a front room of the house right off the front entrance. When he began the search, he just sort of overlooked it because he was sort of in a daze. And so he's like, okay, I'll go back up there and I'll search that last room and then I'll know the whole house is secure. Nobody's here. And so Frank goes back up the basement stairs to the first floor. The girls are tucked up right behind him, still so scared. And he makes his way towards this room, and this room overlooks the front of the property. There are windows looking out to the road. It's just you walk in, there's windows, there's the front of the house, and there's a little closet over to the left. It's like a sitting room. And so Frank, he goes into this room, and right away he sees on the wall right in front of him, written in shaving cream, are the words, "Marry me." And so Frank, he walks over to the words and he's staring at them being like, what is this? Like, who wrote this? The girls, again, are right behind him, tucked up against the back of his legs, and he's staring. And as he's doing that, he hears movement in the closet in the room that he's in. And Frank turns and he looks at this closet. The doors are open to this closet, but it's a dark closet. And out of the closet walks a man who was wearing a dress, Frank's dead wife's dress. This person had clown makeup on their face, and they were wielding a hatchet. And they walk out of the closet, and they look at Frank, and they look at the girls who are so shocked, they're just in silence staring back at the sky. And this person looks at Frank and goes, "You and the girls, go upstairs." And so Frank immediately goes into protector mode, and he gets between the maniac and his girls, and he just tells the girls, like, go up the stairs, do what he says. And the hatchet-wielding maniac just sort of walks along, following after Frank and the girls. Again, Frank sort of staying between this person and the girls. And so Frank shepherds the girls up the stairs. And he's like, go ahead, girls. First bedroom, go in the first bedroom. So they go upstairs. All three girls go into the first bedroom. So Kathleen, Karen, Tina, and then Frank, he goes into the bedroom, and the maniac's right here in the hallway about to follow after Frank. And as soon as Frank gets in the door, Frank shuts the door and holds it shut, and there's suddenly this struggle between the maniac in the hallway and Frank. The maniac's trying to get in, there's this vicious struggle, and Tina, who's already in this bedroom, just turns, runs, and leaps out the second floor window. And so she smashes to the ground, she runs next door to that neighbor's house, she slams on the door, the neighbor comes out, and Tina's screaming about, "There's someone in my house!" And so the neighbor at this point knows this is a real emergency. They call the police, and then minutes later, the police show up, and when they get there, they look up at the Bowen household, and Frank Bowen is leaning out of that second floor bedroom, and he's screaming to the police, "Hey, there's somebody in here. He was just at my door. He's gone. I don't know where he is." And police, they get over, they put a ladder up to the window. Frank comes down, they get the other two girls down, so everybody is safely out of the house now. They've been moved over to that neighbor's house, and now the police are going to go into the Bowen household to find this dress-wearing, hatchet-wielding, clown makeup-wearing maniac. They're going to find him and put him into custody. And so the police, they go into the Bowen household, guns drawn, and they search that entire property, top to bottom, and they find nothing. Nobody's there. The house is completely vacant. However, they would find a hatchet lying by the back sliding glass door, and the back sliding glass door was partially open. And so ultimately, again, when nobody is found inside the house, the police decide, well, clearly this maniac, if there really was a maniac, is now gone. Because look, the door's open, the hatchet's here, so they're gone. And so the police, they go over and talk to Frank and his family, and they're like, look, we don't really know what to make of this. We didn't actually see, this person you claim to have seen in your house. I'm sure there was somebody, but we didn't see them. And so for now, what we're going to do is we're going to monitor your property 24/7 and just see what happens, see if anybody comes in or out. We'll make sure nobody comes to this property, and we'll also begin an investigation in town to try to figure out, who this maniac was. And in the meantime, you and your girls go stay with a family friend or something. Just don't be here because we don't know what's going on here. And so Frank and his girls, they went and stayed with a family friend, and the police began their surveillance of the Bowen household. And for 2 days, nothing happened. Nobody went in or out of the Bowen household. And despite police canvassing the town and trying to figure out, who this maniac could have been, they really didn't get anywhere. Because remember, Frank's description and the girl's description of this maniac was, probably a man wearing a dress with clown makeup on. And so effectively, this person had a disguise on. There was nothing to go on. So they couldn't find anybody in town. There was no leads, and nobody has come to this house. And they're communicating with Frank Bowen the whole time. Basically, nothing's coming of this case. And so finally, 48 hours after, confronting this maniac in the closet, Frank and his girls, they've been at the family friend's house this whole time. And Frank's like, you know what, it'd be great to get my toiletries and a few other things from my house, because basically they evacuated their house and didn't get a chance to pack or anything. And Frank's thinking, nothing's going on at the house. There's no leads in this case. It's got to be safe to go back to my house for a minute and get the things I need.
No.
And so he tells his girls to stay with his family friend, and Frank, by himself, goes over to his house, and it's broad daylight, and he's expecting to find a police officer, who's monitoring his property. And he can tell the officer, hey, I'm just going in real quick to get my stuff. And they would, let him go in and do that. But when he got to his house, he looked around and he didn't see any police officer outside the property watching the property. And he's thinking, that's pretty weird. They told me they've been watching my property 24/7. Where are they? But Frank's like, that's weird, whatever. So he gets out of his car and begins walking towards his front door. But as he's walking, for a second, out of the corner of his eye, he can swear he can see somebody moving in the second floor of his house. But when he looked up, nobody was there. But he was certain somebody had been moving around up there. And Frank's thinking to himself, wait a minute. Are the police monitoring my house from the inside? Is that what they're doing? They've been in my house? I could have sworn they said they were out of my house.
Don't do it, Frank.
And Frank's like, you know what? Just in case, I need to call the police because I don't want to walk in there and startle an armed police officer who's basically looking for an intruder. And so Frank, he goes to that neighbor's house and uses their phone, and he calls the police, and he's like, hey, are you in my house? Is that what you guys have been doing? You've been monitoring my house from the inside? And they're like, no, we have been watching it from the outside. Very likely what's happened here is you've arrived at your house at the exact moment when there is turnover happening between the police officers who are watching it from the outside. Meaning the officer who's been watching your house must have just left, and the incoming officer who will be taking over the next shift is probably on their way, or maybe they're there right now. And in fact, what you should do, Frank, is hang up with us, go back to your property, and very likely the officer will be there or be there soon, and you can talk to them and have them search your house just in case to make sure nobody's in there. And so Frank says, okay. He hangs up the phone, he goes outside, and sure enough, now there is clearly a police officer in a car outside of his property. So Frank goes over and, explains the situation to the officer, and the officer's like, no one's going inside your property. Literally, we have watched this property 24/7, save for a couple of minutes here and there when we're doing turnover, but nobody's gone in or out of your property. But either way, Frank, I'll search your house just to be sure. And so Frank goes back over to the neighbor's house, and this officer goes up to Frank's door. He opens it up, he looks inside, and he can't believe what he's looking at. In the first floor of Frank's house, it's just madness. There are pennies glued to the ceiling of the first floor, and the furniture clearly has been moved all over the place, but it's been stacked in these sort of weird arrangements. And there are glasses of champagne all over the first floor, and there are kitchen knives that have been driven into family photos on the wall. Like the knives are still sticking into the photo, and where these knives have been driven through the photo is always on a picture of either Tina or Karen, the two daughters. And where there are knives in these pictures, above those pictures is written, "I'm going to kill you, Tina," or "I'm going to kill you, Karen." And so this officer obviously knows, we have a problem here. And so he backs out of the house, he calls for reinforcements. And so all these officers go in, guns drawn, now convinced, clearly somebody has found a way to come in and out of this house, or they're still here, and we have to find them. Like clearly the Bowens were not lying about this horrible, maniac that they encountered in the second floor of their house when police first showed up. Clearly that must have happened because they didn't do this. Somebody else did, and they gotta be here. And so police, they tear the Bowen household apart, looking for this maniac. They look everywhere, and they can't find anybody. There's nobody in the house. And on top of that, it had snowed outside, and before they went in, they made sure they walked around the property to see if there were footsteps coming in or out of the property, and there wasn't. Like, it's not possible what they're seeing. But they've now torn the house up, looking for anything, and they found nothing, other than, again, the madness they've seen with the furniture, the writing, the knives. That's all they've found. And so after hours and hours of this very frustrating search, a few of the officers found themselves in the basement, and they're just standing there talking to each other like, this is crazy. We must have missed something. Like, what is it? And at some point, one of those officers who was having that conversation, he had his hand resting on the washing machine, and he's just sitting there like, yeah, what did we miss? What did we miss? And suddenly, as he's leaning against the washing machine moved. And so suddenly there's this gap that's been created by moving the washing machine, and the officer looks at the wall where the machine had been sitting before, and clearly there is a hole on the wall. And the officer gets out his flashlight, and he looks in the wall and kind of scans down, and he sees there's this tunnel that's been burrowed in the wall of the basement, and it goes over to the corner, and looking back at this officer is Danny LaPlante. And he's crouched down, he's got a hatchet over his shoulder, he's wearing a dress, and he's staring back at this officer. I'm going to tell you about Danny LaPlante because this story takes a very dark turn.
This is a real story? Like, this really happened? I'm speechless right now. Look at this guy's eyes. And why does he want to kill the girls? So he would have been in the basement. He heard the seance. He heard them asking for their mother. Man. This story, it's so creepy, but it's so engaging. Like, ah, like the questions that I have in my head right now are are numerous. Let's continue. Let's continue. I got to hear the end.
So Danny LaPlante was 16 years old at the time he was pulled out of the
16.
wall. And 6 months prior to being pulled out of the Bowen household's wall, Danny had had this very brief interaction with Tina Bowen, the 15-year-old. Apparently, they went to school together or had some interaction in town, but Danny had sort of fallen in love or had some sort of romantic interest in Tina, and
Oh
he felt like
man.
Tina had rejected him. Now, Tina did not remember any of this with Danny. This is entirely Danny's memory of what happened. But either way, 6 months earlier, when he had this sense of rejection from Tina, Danny responded to that by breaking into the Bowen household, cutting a hole in their walls, and burrowing tunnels in their walls. And for 6 months, Danny LaPlante lived in the Bowen household in their walls. Now, Danny was not able to access the entire house through the wall in the basement. He could basically
What what I don't understand, how does he cut a giant hole in their wall and nobody heard anything, saw any, like he would have had to have come, he would have had to have broken in and then went to the basement, cut the hole in the wall. But when would he have had time to do this? I'm assuming they had school throughout the day. Pops had work at night, but the girls are still home at night. But I don't know. I don't know. The, you figure the girls would have heard him with a hammer or something to the wall or ripping off down drywall or something, like you know what I mean? Like that, they would have heard this. So when did he have time to get in their house without being seen, do some construction on their wall in the basement, and hide? Let's continue. I'm sorry.
maneuver in the basement and partially into the first floor. But in order to get to the other parts of the house, Danny had to leave the wall. And so, routinely, over these 6 months that he was in their house, Danny would
6 months.
literally, while the family was home, just get out and wander through their house, like as the family is just living there, and they never noticed him. And so, for 6 months, Danny spied on that family 24/7. And when the girls had that seance with the Ouija board to try to contact their mother, Danny was downstairs in the basement in the walls watching, and he saw an opportunity. He thought, I'm going to pretend to be their mother and screw with them. And so when they heard that tapping sound, that was Danny pretending to be their mom. He was absolutely trying to get them to believe their mother was here. But then whenever Frank was around, Danny would stop the tapping and sort of let Frank believe the girls were making it up. And then gradually, Danny sort of transitioned from it's your mom and it's good to actively trying to terrify the girls. He began tapping at all hours of the night. He began sneaking out of the wall, going upstairs to the girls' bedroom, flicking the undersides of their beds, going in their closet, tapping in their closet, and then making sure to be hidden or escape before Frank came in. I mean, this is absolutely psychotic behavior, but it gets worse.
Oh
So
man.
Danny is taken out of the
Look at his
walls and he's
face.
arrested. But then 10 months later, when he is awaiting trial, Danny is released on bail. And while he is on
No.
bail, he would sneak into another family's house in Massachusetts, the Gustafsons' house, and unfortunately, that family would not escape Danny. Danny would murder 3 members of that family for really no particular reason. He just picked a family and killed them. And so very likely, if Tina had not leapt out of the second floor window when Danny revealed himself in that dress with the hatchet and got them to go up to that bedroom, if Tina hadn't leapt out and if Frank hadn't held off the door like that, almost certainly Danny was corralling that family into that room to kill them with the hatchet. But Tina basically saved their lives. As of this video, Danny LaPlante is still alive and he's serving multiple consecutive life sentences, and he actually recently was put up for parole. He didn't get it, he did not get parole, but during his hearing for his parole, when he was rejected, he was determined to be one of the most psychopathic inmates in the entire prison system.
So he's been in prison since 1986. We'll say 87 because it was December. So we'll say 1987. He's been in prison since 1987. Man, that is crazy.
And now, here is a clip from the latest episode of Redacted. Enjoy.
Redacted.
On June 7, 1998, CNN News Group CEO Tom Johnson sat at his desk in his corner office, overlooking the massive newsroom in Midtown Atlanta. Below him, the workspace buzzed with energy. Journalists darted between desks, and banks of monitors flickered with breaking news reports. Johnson was in his element and loved his job. He was known as a no-nonsense leader, and he was well respected by his team. In the nearly 20 years since CNN first launched, the 24-hour cable network had become the most influential source in television news. It changed the landscape for how people learned about breaking news, with correspondents all over the world ready to report at a moment's notice. It was Johnson's job to build on CNN's dominance and drive up the ratings. Johnson turned when he heard a tap on his door. His secretary rushed in and said he had a call from a retired general who was CNN's military analyst. She warned him that the general sounded annoyed, but Johnson was used to putting out fires and dealing with people who were upset, so his secretary's warning didn't alarm him. As soon as Johnson picked up the phone, the general's bristling tone made it clear he was outraged. He told the CEO he'd received some disturbing news. The general had been informed that a segment about a covert military operation in Southeast Asia was scheduled to air on CNN the next night. And apparently this report contained wild allegations about the U.S. military gassing villages, killing American soldiers, and even innocent civilians. Johnson tried to respond, but couldn't get a word in. The general railed that neither he nor CNN's other top military analyst had been consulted about such a damning report. Johnson took a deep breath and said that the general was right. They did plan to air a segment tomorrow night about a covert military operation during the Vietnam War. It was the first episode of a new show called CNN Newsstand, a collaboration with Time magazine. Johnson assured him the story had taken almost a year of careful investigative journalism, but nothing Johnson said swayed the general. He insisted they pull the show. Johnson wasn't about to back down either. Too much work had gone into the episode about a secret military operation called Operation Tailwind. Besides, CNN had already been promoting it heavily. It was simply too late to pull. There was silence on the other end. Then the general spoke in an ominous tone. He told Johnson he was about to make the biggest mistake in the history of CNN. Johnson stood his ground. He ended the call by saying that the story was going to be a bombshell. Johnson would be right, but the story would explode in a way he never saw coming.
No, don't. No, come on. No, hold I, I, I want to know what happened. Oh man, I, I was damn man. That was good. Now, so I wonder, does Mr. Ball are all his stories based on real life events and situations and people? I didn't see that coming. Like I thought this was just going to be a fictitious story to spook you a little bit, but damn, that was good. That was man, that was so good. Where are we at? We're almost at an hour already just from the one video. uh, all right. Let's get into Dougie, man. Let's get into Dougie. Next video from Dougie, we found a journal in the woods with very strange entries. And it says for mature audiences. So if you are underage, watch at your own discretion. I can't get over that Mr. Baldwin video. Let's see what Dougie got for us, y'all. Let's get it.
There was something incredibly sinister about these journal entries. I couldn't tell if the man writing them was in horrible danger or going absolutely insane. And if even half of what he...
And I apologize. I'm sorry. Sorry. If you made it this far, thank you for rocking with your boy. We are officially at 1,000 subscribers. If you haven't already, please drop a like on the video. And if you're not subscribed and want to join this bomb-ass family, hit that subscribe button and hit that bell notification so you stay up to date when we come out with new content. Back to the video.
wrote inside of that journal was true, we need to leave this place ASAP. We didn't believe what we were reading until we saw them.
Saw what?
So we have an incredible announcement for you guys today, and it feels surreal saying this publicly. But here it is. We are officially signing to the great and powerful Ballin Studios. And I want to make this very clear.
There we go.
We feel so incredibly blessed to be given such an incredible opportunity. And it's all thanks to you guys and the platform that you put me on. Thank you all so much for supporting us and putting us on the storytelling map.
So Dougie is now officially a part of Mr. Ballin's crew. That's dope. That is. So I wonder how many other artists he has on there. That's crazy. Congrats, Dougie. I want to see who's else on the roster. See what other storytellers are like. I gotta hear some more.
Couldn't have done it without you. Thank you to the entire Ballin Studios team for being so kind and welcoming to me. And to any new viewers checking out the channel for the first time that came over from Mr. Ballin's channel, I promise to do my best to make the strangest, darkest, and most mysterious content for you all. So let's get to it. But I'll be quick. If you're ready to suspend your disbelief and become fully immersed in today's adventure, you've found your new favorite channel. We post once a week, but there's plenty on the channel to binge. So if you're ready, like the video for good luck, because you're gonna need it. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an upload. Enjoy the show.
Okay. All right, Dougie. Let's go.
Warning. This story is very loosely based on true events. These events are very disturbing and not for the faint-hearted. To get straight to it, I was in Montana last year with my wife and our two friends, Kenny and Sarah, for a 7-day trip. The only reason we had a chance to go on this trip is because Kenny and Sarah had reserved this cabin over a year ahead of time. And we're close friends and they knew that we're into this kind of thing, so they wanted to share the experience with us. There's many reasons that this particular cabin is in such high demand. One of those reasons is just because of how beautiful the landscape is. Another reason is the incredible mountain biking trails and hiking trails nearby. And the third reason is the incredible skiing in the local area. But the real reason it was in high demand, the real reason Kenny and Sarah wanted to stay there so badly and were willing to plan this trip so far ahead of time is because of this cabin's reputation for being extremely haunted. Kenny and Sarah love that kind of thing. They don't visit anywhere without staying at the worst hotel possible with the most sightings of ghosts. And naturally, they wanted me and Jess to come with them because they think that we're beacons of paranormal activity. And they offered this opportunity to us, basically telling us, we just want you here as bait. They told us that as a joke. They weren't actually using us for bait. The reality is that we're all great friends. And this was going to be an incredible time. And obviously, Jess and I are willing to go to places like that for an adventure. The way we approach life is, if something crazy happens along the way, so be it. But if we end up having a beautiful, relaxing time, there's a first time for everything. So this cabin is located near Whitefish Lake in Montana, closer to some of the smaller lakes to the west of Whitefish Lake. But it's fairly isolated. I remember the cabin had about 3 acres of heavily wooded property. And outside of the 3-acre property, there was 500 acres of protected forest in every direction. It was still reasonably close to the main attractions in that big area, but it still had that isolated feel to it. The cabin itself was great. It was very clearly updated and refurbished. It had a great feel to it. And it had this cabin / treehouse warm cozy vibe. The cabin had 3 stories. The middle story was rather small, but it had a wraparound porch so you could see the entire property. The property itself was exactly what you're looking for in a isolated getaway. Just a house plopped in a circle clearing with one trail leading back through a forest to the road. There was only about 50 feet of grass in every direction before it hit a heavy tree line. And then, like I said, 500 acres of forest surrounding you in every direction. I'll spare you the details of how inconvenient it is to get to a place like that, but we got there, and I immediately regretted going. This place had a horrible vibe to it. All of the description that I just gave you was me looking at pictures on the internet. Once I arrived there, I was terrified. I don't know how else to express this to you, but it felt unnatural being there. I thought I would be able to look past the silly haunting stories that Sarah and Kenny had told us, but I couldn't. But you know, it wasn't really the haunting stories that were making me feel that way. It was something else. It didn't feel paranormal there. It didn't feel like I was going to turn around and see a ghost. It felt different. It felt unnatural. Pulling into that clearing, it almost felt poisonous. The air, the grass, the trees around it. It felt like my body was viscerally repulsed by the area in general. I remember feeling nauseous upon arrival, and I felt this odd sensation in my tongue like it was buzzing. I don't know if any of you licked batteries like I did as a kid, but if you know that light static feeling that you get when you put your tongue on a battery,
Yeah.
it felt like that over the entire thing. And I felt it the moment I took my first inhale exiting the car and taking in the air. Beyond just the feeling that I was getting,
That is one hell of a description. Wow. And this is why I love I love Dougie and Mr. Ballin teaming up together. Oh man, I can't wait to see. I feel like they can unlock different things in each other. What if they do a collab story? Ah, man. But I love Dougie's inflection, and like he just he makes you feel every word, you know? I love this man. Let's continue.
the place didn't match the feeling that I was getting. This was a picture-perfect cabin in a picture-perfect clearing. It looked like it should be in a snow globe. This place was so perfect that it felt off. And obviously, I wasn't going to leave immediately. We had just had the longest travel day of my life. And no type of haunting story or buzzing tongue was going to stop me from showering and getting comfy in that cabin. I was justifying the way that I was feeling by convincing myself that it was just all of the travel adding up. And the bumpy, winding roads that we took to get to this cabin didn't help either. And to be honest, after a shower, I did feel much better. After a change of clothes and washing off the airport, I felt like I was ready to spend a week there. So we're all showered and settled in, and we converge back into the main area to start planning out our week. But before we got into the itinerary, obviously, we have to do the full tour of the cabin so we could truly appreciate how perfect this place was. This place was pristine, polished, and perfectly aligned. Nothing was out of place. At least it was perfect in my messy man eyes. Everybody knows a man could live in an apartment by himself with a beanbag, an Xbox, and a TV and be perfectly content. Throw a poster of your favorite sports team on the wall and the place really starts to come together. What I'm trying to say is that I don't have an eye for tasteful decor and tidiness. To me, the place was absolutely perfect, but to my wife, there was a glaring issue. And this glaring issue was the fact that the painting that was hanging on the exposed brick wall was about 2 degrees off from perfect. When I tell you a level couldn't see what she saw, I mean it, but this needed to be fixed and needed to be fixed immediately. So she walked right up to this canvas painting, gave it a little wiggle, and wouldn't you know it, nail fell out of the wall, canvas painting on the floor, it's a disaster. And the old nail that was holding it up fell into a nearby vent, never to be seen again. All of us thought it was funny that we broke something almost right away, but none of us thought the clearly loose brick on this exposed brick wall was funny. Because Jess slapped the wall after the painting fell, and one of the bricks on this wall clearly budged, as if it could move independently from the wall that it was supposed to be a part of. I started to get that buzzing sensation on my tongue again as I watched my wife slip this brick out of its place on the wall. And once the brick was out, it exposed a clear cubbyhole. I knew she wasn't about to shove her hand recklessly into that cubbyhole because the facial expression on her face towards me was, babe, that cranny has a high probability of being home to arachnids. So you're gonna have to take over from here. From where I was standing, I could see into that little cubbyhole pretty clearly, and it seemed to only hold one item. So I whip my phone out and I say, hey Siri, Lumos. I check inside of this little cranny hole to make sure there are no spiders before reaching in and pulling out what seems to be a journal. This journal wasn't very old or raggedy or torn up or even dusty. It was in fairly good shape. It looked pretty new. If I were to guess, I would say it hadn't been in there for more than 5 years. And my suspicion was confirmed on the first page of that journal. And obviously, everybody else in the room was curious, so I opened it to the first page and I read it aloud. And the journal read, "The owner of this journal is named Arlo Finch. Date July 22nd, 2020. So this journal was only about 4 years old, and it was clearly this man named Arlo's personal journal. And with a quick inspection, it seemed as if it was half full with entries. And before I moved on from the first page, I gave the entire journal a quick skim like it's a flip book. I wanted to see how much was actually written in it, and I was taken aback by the gradual increase of the size and intensity of these entries. What I mean is that I could only see about a fourth of each page as I was flipping through it quickly, but I could see a clear uptick into the intensity and effort into each entry. These entries started off very short with neat and delicate handwriting, but progressively got longer and sloppier, as if the writer was in a hurry and he couldn't write these things down fast enough. There were also sketches in random parts of these entries, as if they drew a sketch on the page first and then still decided to do a journal entry around the drawing, which made the chicken scratch handwriting that more difficult to follow. I looked up from this journal and everybody else in the room had this deep expression of intrigue. It was already getting late and we were about to turn on the fireplace anyway, so it was creepy journal time. We grabbed some snacks, some hot chocolate, we gathered around the fire, and we popped open Arlo Finch's personal journal and started to give it a read. So I gave the first entry a light read myself to see if it was worth our while or it was just horribly boring, but it wasn't either of those two things. Arlo's first journal entry was devastatingly sad. So I read it to the group like this. August 1st, 2020. The doctor told me that journaling would help. Nothing else has helped so far, so I thought I'd give it a try. I miss them so much. I didn't even know him yet, and I still miss him. How could the doctors ask me to make that decision at that moment? Decide between my wife and my son? You make me choose my wife? You make me sacrifice my son and then you let her die too? You make me decide to let my baby die? Then tell me that if we prioritize saving him, he would have made it? I chose my wife. I can't feel guilty about that. I shouldn't feel guilty about that. We could have tried for another. We would have mourned our boy together and we would have honored him by continuing to build a family. And I wasn't even with her. I wasn't even allowed in the room because of this virus restrictions. My entire family died with strangers while I was locked out of the room, with passing nurses having the audacity to tell me to put my mask back above my nose. I need to get out of this city. I can't be in these apartments anymore. I think I'm gonna leave tomorrow. Maybe journaling does help. That was the end of the first entry, and I looked up at the faces of the others, and their facial expressions were telling me that they were feeling the same way that I was feeling. This felt like an invasion of privacy, and whatever Arlo was going through during this time was very heavy. But I turned the page and I read the second entry because apparently we're all incredibly nosy. August 4th, 2020. My pops is going to take care of my apartment for me, and he's going to put all my stuff in storage. I couldn't stay in that place for another day. I just landed in Montana. I found an extended stay up in Whitefish Lake. I'm not sure if being alone right now is what's best for me, but I don't know what else to do. I don't want to see anybody. I don't want anybody else's pity, and I don't want to have to explain what happened to anyone ever again. I feel like I need to mourn in private, but I also know I need to keep my hands busy. Sabrina always wanted to visit Montana. We talked about it for years. Retiring in a little cabin in the middle of nowhere, just us and our little family living off the land. Two city kids with no idea how to survive. I think we could have done it together though. There's nothing that we couldn't make work together. I bought a rifle. Maybe I'll become the Montana man that she dreamed about. Or maybe I'll just use it to see her again. We'll see how nice the cabin is. At this point, Jess, me, Sarah, and Kenny were all hooked on this man's story. Part of us felt very wrong reading it, but it was too intriguing not to. A man from New York lost his wife and his son in labor. Then he fled to this cabin that we're currently sitting in during a global pandemic. It was like the start of a Stephen King novel. I asked everybody else if they wanted me to keep going, and we all agreed that we would do one more entry tonight. Then we would read a couple more entries every single night that we were here until the journal was finished. I flipped the page and I read the next few. August 5th, 2020. The cabin's pretty nice, so I think I'm going to use the rifle for hunting before I make my decision. I think Sabrina would have loved it here. I'm really enjoying my phone being off and the world not having access to me, and I'm going to stay out here for as long as they'll have me. I'm probably not going to have to go to town for much. Gonna go explore the property. I'll see you tomorrow, journal. August 6th, 2020. Staying busy, spending most of the day outside today. There's a nice hill that I found that I've been sitting on and praying. Praying feels good. I don't know why I never did it. And there's a stream nearby that's nice to walk along. The sound of the water flowing drowns out my thoughts for a while. It's really hard for me to accept that they're never coming back. August 7th. I couldn't get myself to get out of bed today. Maybe tomorrow. August 8th. I'm having a really hard time. I wish this pain onto nobody. My heart feels like a void. August 9th. I only left the cabin today because if I didn't, it would have been the end. I couldn't find my prayer hill. I'm still getting used to the property, but the tire swing hanging from the big tree in front of the house was my savior today. I spent the afternoon pushing it and spinning it for my boy, just imagining that he was in it. We had fun. His eyes are like his mom's. August 10th. I found my prayer hill today. I think I spoke to God. I experienced something that I can't put into words. I felt like Moses experiencing the burning bush. I was in the presence of something greater. I think it was God. I'm pretty sure he's going to answer my prayers. I wish I could tell you more about it, journal, but you know what they say. A religious experience is like honey. It has a taste that you can't explain. It's sweet for sure, but it's unlike sugar. It's unlike syrup. It's unlike anything else. The only description that you could use describing honey is that it tastes like honey. I tasted honey today. and it made my tongue hum. I had to stop reading after that last line that I read. And it wasn't because of how devastating this man's story was or how intrusive it felt reading it out loud, but it's because he said that it made his tongue hum, the same way that I felt my tongue vibrate when I first arrived here. And yeah, he could have been explaining the sensation of tasting honey and using hum as a synonym for like tasty. But the way that he said it made me feel nauseous. It felt too close to home for me, but for everybody else, they wanted to hear what was next. But I had to take a break from it. I closed the book and I was like, guys, we could read some more tomorrow. Let's not spoil the whole story on the first night. I was hoping that everybody else would forget and we would just leave that man's tragic story to rest. But that was very unlikely. Here's to hoping. We went to sleep after our long travel day and our very intrusive journal entry reading, and we spent the entire next day exploring the nearby trails in the property. It was gorgeous out there, and everybody else was in such good spirits, and that helped me, but I also had to put on a show a little bit and pretend that I was meeting them at their level. The reality was that I was getting waves of hot flashes and hums on my tongue, as Arlo Finch would say, and these feelings would pick up when we would see something or come across something that he mentioned in that journal. Because we found the hill that he mentioned, the hill that he started praying on. It was in this beautiful clearing, and we climbed to the top of it, and it was gorgeous. You could see over all of the trees. And to be fair, it was a beautiful place to pray. And we found the stream that he mentioned, and it did have a great way of creating an ambiance of peace. And we found the tire swing out front that he mentioned, and we all took turns getting into it, swinging each other and spinning each other until we were too dizzy to continue. The others were clearly not as affected by Arlo's story as I was, and I was curious as to why. And while we were having lunch, it was nagging at me so much that I had to bring it up to everybody. But I did it in a very calm way. I didn't want to make it seem like this was actually bothering me. I tried to make it playful. I just said, do you guys not find that journal as disturbing as I do? Because I can't stop thinking about it. Everybody laughed a little bit, and then Kenny responded, dude, this is literally a haunted destination rental property. That journal is probably just a fun prop for us to enjoy, and if we snooped around a little bit more, we'd probably find other fun things. He had a point, but I still had to reply. Doesn't it seem a little too real to you? Like, a husband losing his wife and son in labor seems to be a little too dark for a prop. But Kenny brushed it off by saying, dude, with how much this place is charging per night, they better have realistic props. You'll see by the end of it, it'll clearly be a prop. I bet it has a great payoff at the end. Try to enjoy the effort that the host put into it, man. That's why we're here. Jess could tell that it actually bugged me, and she told me in private to just play along. She could feel when something is off with me and when something actually bothers me, and she would never brush it off like Kenny did. But the reality was that Kenny was probably right, and I was just dealing with waves of anxiety symptoms that I deal with from time to time. Like the hum on my tongue was new, but I'm not new to dealing with anxiety symptoms. Like I'm used to seeing the stars in my peripheral vision and getting heart palpitation and cold sweats. So I did my best to fight them off and just try to enjoy the day. But of course, as nighttime came around, the fireplace got turned on, the warm drinks got passed around, and I found myself reading another entry to the group. This one was much different from the previous entries. The handwriting in the other ones was very neat and it was written patiently. This entry looked like it was done in a hurry and the writer was scribbling it down erratically. August 11th. It's my 8th day out here. God heard me. He answered me. He's giving me real signs and real hope. And I think he's bringing her back to me today. I could see her divine light everywhere I look. It started as a glint of light in the distance through the trees, like the sun shined through a gap and beamed into your eye as you walked past. Then it was a reflection off the stream, too beautiful to be a coincidence. Like the source of the divine light was right under the surface. Now it follows me everywhere I go, right outside of my field of vision, dancing in my peripheral, glowing a hopeful glow. It's always there, like it's hovering over my shoulder. I know it's her. I know she found me, and now she's watching over me. My heart feels full today. I might be able to live like this, and I pray that she lets me look at her tomorrow. I'll go to my prayer hill, and I'll pray. I finished that journal entry feeling very deeply sorry for Arlo, because the pain that he was feeling seemed so desperate that his brain was trying to find any way to cope with it. I looked around the room to see if anybody wanted to stop reading like I did, but everybody looked intrigued and impatient, like they were wondering why I stopped. So I made the mistake of continuing to read. The handwriting was even worse on the next page. It looked like the manifesto of a lunatic. August 12th. That thing is not my wife, and it is not God. It's false, it's nefarious, and it's conniving. I prayed and I prayed.
That thing is not my wife and it's not God. So what has he been communicating with? Oh man, 11 minutes left. Let's finish this.
Prayed, and I begged for her to present herself to me, even if it was just one last time. From the top of the hill, of my prayer hill, I felt it approach me from behind, and I begged for it to come around to the front. I knew that it would disappear if I tried to turn around and look at it myself. I closed my eyes and I begged, and I could feel it making its way around to in front of me. I felt the hum on my tongue, and I felt the breeze on my hair and face from my wife's angel wings flapping in front of me. I felt her warmth in that moment. I felt her touch, and I opened my eyes, ready for my wife's embrace, only to be met by some type of fractal light hovering in front of me. I don't even know if it was hovering. I don't even know if it was tangible. It almost looked like a gash in reality, like a fissure in space-time. It looked like the lights of a different reality was shining through a tear in ours, but it wasn't stagnant, it moved freely. It was completely omnidirectional, as if it followed no laws of physics. I thought it was my wife's soul hovering in front of me, until it touched me. The light emanating from it felt like a touch, not like sunlight hitting your skin. It felt like its light was physically touching me, and once it touched me, it felt like somebody attached a car battery to my tongue and lit my insides on fire. I could hear it in my head like a million voices screaming simultaneously. I met pure evil today, and I was the one that begged it to come to me. When I looked up from this journal entry, everybody's facial expression completely changed. This was not what we thought it was going to be. This wasn't a fun, spooky story. I promise it was not a spooky prop left by a host to enhance our visit. This was a very disturbing story from a man that was in so much pain that he was legitimately losing his mind. And it wasn't just the words that were said on the page, it was the way that they were written. It's like his hand was violently shaking the entire time. Whoever wrote this, apparently Arlo Finch, was going through an existential crisis that was so deeply disturbing and bad. It was giving him very real physical symptoms. The worst part about it for me was that I felt one of his symptoms when I arrived here. A buzzing tongue is way too specific.
Yeah.
I closed the journal and I told everybody that we should save some for tomorrow. What I actually meant was, can we please stop? Jess and I went back to our bedroom and I told her about my symptoms. She's aware of my usual anxiety ones. She has never heard me say my tongue was buzzing when we got here. And I told her it happened right when we arrived and it keeps happening every time we go to places that he mentioned. She asked me if I wanted to leave. I told her no, but I did tell her that I did not want to read any more of that journal. We spent the next day hiking far away from the cabin, and when we came back, we could tell that Ken and Sarah wanted to do our fun, spooky, nightly routine of journal reading. And I tried to tell them, I tried to express this to them, that this was freaking me out, and they were like, dude, that's what it's supposed to do. Internally, I'm like, I'm the one dealing with a buzzing tongue, dude, but whatever. Clearly, I'm not going to read it. But Kenny picks up the journal and flips it open to where I left off. And his joking smile left his face when he read the first line. August 13th. I'm going to die here, I think. I haven't seen that thing, but it doesn't feel the same here anymore. It feels like the essence of life has been stripped from the scenery. I'm in the same place I was yesterday, but it feels so foreign. The tire swing moved today. It didn't swing by itself. It moved to a different tree. Like somebody untied it and moved it 3 trees over. I wasn't the one that moved it. I'm running low on food, and the faucet stopped working. I'm going to the stream tomorrow to gather water. I'm gonna run an experiment on the trees tonight. I think I'm gonna die here. August 14th. I was wrong about the tire swing, and my experiment worked. I carved tally marks into the trees to number them last night. The tire swing didn't move. The trees rearranged themselves again last night. I numbered them 1 through 10 in order from left to right. The order this morning was 347 192 10856. We'll check again tomorrow to see if there are any changes. I'm having a hard time remembering where I am and how I got here. I'm going to look for my prayer hill now. I think it's moving too. August 15th. I found the prayer hill today. It is moving too. I think something defamed my hill, and I can't get the image of it out of my mind. Its surface was covered with thousands of small, round pits. The pits were clustered so tightly that they seemed to pulse like an optical illusion. The pattern felt too deliberate. It felt too unnatural, like something wrong had carved its mark there. You can't tell how deep the holes are. They're like black, endless pits, but staring at them too long made me sick to my stomach. It looked like the ground itself was infected with some horrible rash, and it felt like it was waiting for something. And I thought I saw something pop out of one of the pits, like a whack-a-mole machine, but it burrowed itself away very quickly. It reminded me of that Pokemon Diglett. I bet my son would have liked Pokemon. I ran out of food today. I just wanted Kenny to stop reading so badly, and thank God God that he did. Everything about this man's journal was just purely unnerving. The things that he was describing were so unsettling that I don't think M. Night Shyamalan would make a movie about it. I think M. Night would say, no, this is too disturbing. I don't think this would resonate with viewers. And if M. Night would pass on it, I don't think any random rental company would leave it around for tenants. Everybody at that point was a little bit freaked out, and we all needed a bit of reassurance to make sure that what was happening in this journal was not actually happening around us. We knew that the hill wasn't covered in rash-like pits that would trigger our trinophobia, if that's what it's called. Or trypophobia. Is it trypophobia, trinophobia? I don't know. But we still hadn't checked the trees in front of the cabin. But when we looked out of the window, the swing was hanging where we remembered it was hanging. And the next morning, it was still there too. Our trees were definitely not moving, but the carved tally marks that Arlo mentioned in the journal were carved into the trees in front of the cabin. And just like he said, they were 1 to 10 from left to right. Arlo Finch stayed here, and he more than likely lost his mind here as well. That was enough for us. That was kind of our tipping point. We didn't read any entries for the next few days, and we collectively didn't talk about it. We didn't gather by the fireplace after our long days of exploring. None of us wanted to read any further into what this journal said as long as we still had to sleep there. And let me tell you, I was grateful when we stopped because my symptoms went away when we did. My tongue did not hum for the rest of the trip. And we got up that morning that we were scheduled to leave, and I was elated to get out of there. Our checkout was at noon, so we had to be out of there by noon, but it was 11 a.m. and we were all completely packed, ready to get out of there. So with an hour to spare, with nothing to do other than leave and never step foot in this place again, we didn't have to sleep there. We got to leave. We weren't victims of this place anymore, and we had an hour to spare, and we spent that hour finding out what happened to Arlo Finch. I wasn't scared anymore. I knew we were about to leave, so I picked up the journal and I picked up where we left off. August 16th. The sun didn't set last night. It's been daytime for 32 hours and the sun isn't halfway across the sky yet. I think I might have died on that hill. I might be stuck in purgatory. The trees are back in order today. They're 1 to 10. Either I'm schizophrenic now, or this place is showing me that it's intelligent. I haven't slept or eaten and it took me 4 hours to find the stream. It seems like it isn't just the trees scrambling each night. It seems to be the entire property that shifts. It happened overnight at first and I didn't notice it, but now I think I could hear things shifting in the distance. It sounds like a rumbling earthquake and leaves rustling, followed by a sound that is reminiscent of earth settling. It takes me longer to get back to the cabin every time I feel it. This has to be some type of punishment, because I let my wife and son die, and this is God's punishment. I need water, but I don't think I deserve it. August 17th. The sun went down for 3 hours, but it's back up now, and it's moving as slowly as before. My watch doesn't match the time of day. I found a map of the area in a junk drawer in the cabin, and I used it to get to the stream. The trails don't match. I didn't get to the stream. I ended up at the prayer hill. I walked to where the prayer hill should have been and the stream was there. And I can't pick up the water. It's right there flowing in front of me, but it goes through my hands like it's air. I tried to pick it up with a thermos. No luck. I felt like the horse that you bring to water, and I couldn't drink. It was like being stuck in the middle of the ocean, surrounded by water, but dying of thirst. I know I'm gonna die here. August 18th. Still daytime. I tried to kill something today. I'd never killed something other than an insect before, but I'm Sabrina's Montana man now. I figured once I killed the first one, it would be as easy as riding a bike. There are deer all over this place, so instead of hunting one, I hid until one walked in front of me. I shot it at point blank range, and when the bullet hit the deer, it made an interesting sound. It sounded like somebody hit a gong, and the deer looked up at me like I was a non-threat. It walked off like nothing happened, like I didn't just shoot it. I picked up the bullet and it was crushed like an empty soda can, like this deer was Superman. The gong hasn't stopped since I shot it. There's a reoccurring beat that seems to be coming from underneath me. It's still daytime. I'm gonna try to hike out tomorrow. August 19th. No matter which way I walk, it takes me back to the cabin. The beat hasn't stopped, and the sun hasn't come back up this time. I got to the prayer hill. There's thousands of lights coming out of the endless black pits. They're beaming up to the clouds like it's a bat signal coming from every single hole. The trees aren't hiding their movement from me anymore. They're in constant motion, like the forest is a busy city filled with people walking in every direction. I think the animals are upset with me because I tried to shoot their friend. Stags have circled the cabin and they scream when I try to come outside. They seem to all be ready to gore me with their antlers. My rifle doesn't work when I try to use it on myself. If I wake up tomorrow, it will be a miracle. I've never been so thirsty in my life. August 20th. I am in endless night. Nothing has changed. I'm probably gonna die today. I can't wait to see you, Sabrina. This world didn't deserve you. If at the end of this nightmare I get you back, it'll all be worth it. I wish I didn't have to wait. I emptied the magazine on myself. They're all crushed like beer cans when they hit the roof of my mouth. August 21st. My wife, My son, I'm almost there. I look up from the journal after that last entry and everybody in the room is in tears. It's 11:55 and it's time.
I was just about to say, man, it him reciting this portion of the story, he sounded like he was choking up a little bit. You know what I mean? Like you could see it in his eyes a little bit. It seems very. This might be the part of the story that's loosely based on real facts because it seems like it's touching him a little bit to tell the story. So maybe there was names were changed, specific instances were changed, but the journal and a person really or wrote all this down in their own journal, and it was found by someone. I don't know.
Time to go. There was nothing fun or spooky about that journal. It did not enhance our experience at this place whatsoever. That journal was a tragedy. Arlo Finch is a victim of circumstance. And we were all very grateful to leave this place. And as I'm driving out of the clearing past these trees, in the corner of my eye, I see 2 carved slashes in the bark of the tree closest to me. That tree was supposed to be 10, and I ignore those slashes, just like I ignore the fractal light beaming into my eye from my rearview mirror. Arlo started seeing it on day 7. We left on day 7.
Man. So I'm very curious though, like, cause I don't feel like that story was complete. So did Arlo actually die eventually? What happened? You know what I mean? Like, man, that was more so traumatizing than scary. Like hearing someone's tragic pain. Man, that. uh, Anyways, let me gather my composure. I apologize. So those are our stories for tonight, man. We had Mr. Ballin, we had Dougie Corrado. Let me know how you feel about these in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please smash that like button, hit that subscribe if you're not already, share this video, comment which story you like more, or which story sticks with you more, because they were both kind of tragic, honestly. But yeah, man, that's all we got for tonight. I love and appreciate every last one of you guys. Thank you for all the support. We're now aiming for our first 5K subscribers. Hit our hit our first 1,000 today. Now we're shooting for 5,000. Stay tuned. I forgot to mention, so I'm glad I'm doing it now. We will be doing a 1K giveaway. More details will be coming shortly, but I'm gonna let you know right now. We're gonna have our entry period. I'll describe all this later in a later video, and whoever wins, you will have $500 to be able to purchase whatever sneakers of your choice. I think that's how we're gonna do it. So no more than $500. You get to pick whatever you want. I will order, not including shipping, not 500 alone, not including shipping. I'll take care of shipping as well, but I'll order them after you pick your winning, and then I'll ship them to you myself. So that's how we will do the live or the giveaway. Like I said, more content will be given, more information will be given on this giveaway in the coming days after Thanksgiving. And another one. I apologize. Happy early Thanksgiving to everyone. If I won't be able to see you or talk to you tomorrow. Happy Thanksgiving, man. Stay blessed. But that's all we got for tonight, man. Love and appreciate it. Last one of you guys. Until next time. Peace.